Well, good evening, everyone. It's good to see you here on a Wednesday night, getting closer to Christmas, and we're dealing with crucifixion. So that just seems like something that's normal to me, right? I'm just totally in a different part of the Bible. But we've worked our way all the way through the book of Mark, and it's been a great study. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope that I've pulled out a lot of things that maybe you haven't seen, and go back and reread and restudy. Hopefully we'll pull out a little bit more tonight. Over the next 3 to 4 weeks, we will finish up Mark throughout this year. And so we like chapter 14, 15, and 16. I've been working hard to get here. And so tonight we will begin, as we've kind of walked our way, especially this last week or two, probably 3 or 4 weeks, as we've kind of come with Jesus is at Jerusalem. It's the Holy Week, or the week of Passover. It's getting time for the Passover. And everything is building up to this moment. Everything has been building up to the time where He's fixing to step on the stage and be who He's supposed to be, the Lamb of God, the one that's to be sacrificed. And so everything has happened. We've talked about how He cursed the fig tree, how He went up into the temple and ran out the money changers. He has done miracles. He has been tested. All the questions we talked about He's gone through, to the point to where they said they didn't ask Him any more questions. They got tired of trying to debate with Him, and He kept embarrassing them and pulling out coins and showing them, and just everything He did was setting Him up for this. So they weren't asking Him any more questions. In fact, He began to ask them questions, and they couldn't answer them. So it has come to a boiling point. They realize we can't stop Him. We can't outthink Him. We can't outmaneuver Him. We just got to get rid of Him. And so what begins now in chapter 14, especially through verse 42, is where we will cover up to tonight. What is taking place is that in that process of time, it is Jesus showing you how to prepare for the fight. Look at the person beside you and say, do you know how to prepare for what Satan's bringing? Do you know how to prepare for what Satan's bringing? In fact, Satan right now has a plot. He has a plot to destroy your marriage. He has a plot to destroy your kids. He's not even just thinking about you. He's thinking about how to use you to ruin their lives, how your scars are going to be passed on to them. Satan has a plot. Don't be so dumb. Please don't be so dumb to think that I just have bad luck. No, you don't. There is an enemy that is plotting against you, that is scheming against you, that is trying to ruin not only your life, but the lives of those around you. He is working very hard in putting all the pieces he can together to make it happen. Now, at the same time, you would think that, well, that sounds horrible. Well, at the same time, God is using what you're fixing to go through to bring Him glory. What you're fixing to have to face to make His name greater. This is the battle. It is the battle between these two worlds in which we can't see. This world that is more real than the one we live in. And they are in a battle, and you are the pawn, the piece that gets to choose which side. And God made it that way. And He doesn't even make it that way for us. He made it that way for His own Son. Jesus, as we will study right here, is put in the position. Satan has it. God has it. And Jesus has to decide, will I walk it out? And every one of us in this room will have to decide that. So let's look at, if we choose God, and we choose just not to just sit back and let the enemy rob us of whatever way he wants to, and we just end up with what's left. If we decide to fight or to overcome him, then what does getting prepared look like for battle? Paul said, we fight not against flesh and blood, but against powers and principalities of the air. Our warfare is not for physical pulling down and doing, but we pull down strongholds through the spiritual world. So let's look at this beginning at verse 1, and we're going to cover a lot of scripture, so I'm going to just kind of break it down as we go, and you're going to mark out and figure out, okay, got to have that, got to have that. So beginning at chapter 14, verse 1, here we go. And it was 2 days before the Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread, and the chief priest and the scribes were seeking how to arrest him,
by stealth and kill him. So these are the representatives of the satanic world at that time. Jesus is using them as a representation. Because Jesus was once asked, well, we know who our father is, and Jesus says, you don't know who you're of. Your father, the devil, and Jesus just point blank told him, he said, your dad's the devil. You're doing what he wants you to do. You may not realize it, but you're doing it. And so we have this one side, and this one side is built toward one thing. I want to kill you. I want to stop you. I want to take you off the map. And so here we have, for they said, not during the feast, lest there be an uproar from the people. So the enemy wants to do it, but he wants to do it in a way that doesn't bring him into the limelight, that doesn't make him look like he's all-powerful or he's almighty. Satan doesn't want that reputation. He doesn't want you to think that he's actually working. He wants it to come about where somebody would just say, well, they had it coming. Well, I knew they were going to mess up sooner or later. I knew their family, and I knew. Satan wants it to look so to the point to where you don't recognize him, that you think it's just natural that the world is the way it is. Think about it. You turn on the 6 o'clock news and somebody shoots somebody, somebody stabs somebody, somebody blows up something, and you don't cry. You've done got to the point to where it's so normal, and nobody jumps up and say, man, Satan is ruining the world. Nobody says that. We say, there's a lot of messed up people in this world. Well, who do you think messed them up? They all went to your public education. They all were taught by sophisticated people. So how did they get so messed up? I mean, they drank their alcohol in moderation, because you don't, and of course, if you have an alcohol problem, please call this number at the end. I mean, we've done everything in the world to help you out. The enemy wants to do it in a way to where you look at each other one day in a marriage and just say, well, we just weren't meant to be together. Really? That's what you're going to believe? Well, we're just not, all our kids, some kids, they don't know what happens to them. They just go, really? You're just going to give up on them for that? See, that becomes your battle. That becomes your fight. There's an enemy who's plotting. And he's plotting it to do it in such a way that nobody even recognizes that it was him. But now notice the next verse. And while he was at Bethany, it's amazing, during this plot where he's describing, the enemy that he's describing, he stops right in the middle of it and he says, but let me tell you a story. Mark says, I know I'm digging in here and I'm setting everything up, but let me just take a break. And in the middle of all that's going on, understand God is not ignorant to it. In fact, God is part of it. God is allowing it. How do we know God is allowing it? Well, listen to what it says. And while he was at Bethany in a house, not knowing now, look at the person beside you and say, he didn't know the plot. He didn't know all his enemies, but God did. So while he was at Bethany in the house of Simon the leper, this is someone he has healed in times past, and because he's healed him, Simon, who lives close to Jerusalem, says, while you're going to Jerusalem, come stay with me. And so he's staying with him during this whole week. And he was reclining at a table, and a woman who came with an alabaster flask of ointment of pure nard, very costly, and she broke the flask and poured it over his head. There was some who said to themselves indignantly, why was this ointment wasted like this? So someone rose up and said, what a waste of money. Because listen to what the next verse says. For this ointment could have been sold for more than 300 denarii, which is basically, and given to the poor. And they scolded her. Now this word scolded does not mean they just kind of like, well, that was dumb. They didn't say that. They didn't even look at her and just say, really? No, the word scold there means that they were continually badgering her. They didn't just say, really? They were like, How dumb can you be? I mean, you don't know no better. And while she's just trying to ignore, they're still just going off on her. They're still just railing on her. Did you see that? I mean, you can't be no dumber than that. Just wasting stuff. I mean, they were continually, and this ointment of 300 denarii, you made 1 denarii per day of work. So it was over almost a year and a half if you took weekends, if you just worked 5 days a week, you just did your normal. It was over a year and a half worth of work. These flasks were about 7 to sometimes 9 inches tall. They were just carved. They were sealed. The ointment inside of them, once the flask is broken, it's done. You can't use it anymore. And she knew that the moment I break this, that it's done. And yet she comes and she breaks this valuable thing that she has. And the oil runs over his head and it fills the room with fragrance. But Jesus said, leave her alone. Because see, if you don't understand, they were scolding and just continually, if it was just a really? No, it was like they were, and he just stops the whole thing and says, leave her alone. And then he lets them know that in the middle of this battle, in the middle of this thing that's going on, there's one thing for sure that you need to realize. Listen, but Jesus said, leave her alone. Why do you trouble her? She has done a beautiful thing to me. For you always have the poor with you, and whenever you want, you can do good for them, but you will not always have. Let me tell you something. Don't ever feel bad if you're sitting there and you're at lunch and there's somebody that's sitting beside you and they may be your boss. They may make 3 times what you make. They may have more money than you, drive a Jaguar every day to work, but you all of a sudden are sitting there and God lays on your heart and says, buy their lunch. Why would I need to buy their lunch? They don't need me to buy their lunch. They got plenty of money. That's not the point. You don't know what they're going through. You don't know what they're facing at the moment. You don't know what's going on in their life. You don't know the last word the doctor just said over them. No, what you need to realize is that God at those moments will send people into your life, and He will also use you for those moments to do something, to confirm in them that they're on the right path, even though at the moment life seems like it's going upside down. Jesus knows what He's fixing to go up against. Jesus knows the battle that's coming. But to have somebody come along and say, you know what? I recognize what you're doing. You know what? I'm proud to be counted a part of you. You know what? I've got the most valuable thing I got, the most valuable thing I've collected for years. I've been saving this. It took me years to make this and to have this. I've been keeping it in a special place, but you are worth it. You are worth breaking it. And she breaks it and pours it over his head. And listen, for you always have the poor. You can always give $5 to somebody later. You can always do something good later, but you can't always do that thing at the moment for somebody who needs it. So when your wife, your husband, when your best friend, when somebody comes in and their head's down, it's okay. Give them a hug. And let them know, hey, it's going to be all right. I got you back. I'm with you. Because they may not at the moment even have themselves. And Jesus, while all this is going on in His mind and while all this is rattling, in walks a woman and changes the whole atmosphere of the room. For you have the poor with you, and whenever you want, you can do good for them, but you will not always have me. And truly I say to you, wherever the gospel is proclaimed in the whole world, what she has done will be told in memory of her. Isn't it amazing? 2,000 years later, I'm still telling you the story about a lady breaking a jar of perfume over Jesus' head. And Jesus said, when you do good to somebody, and you do it out of the kindness and you do it out of the trueness of your heart, it won't go unlocked. Listen, when you give someone a compliment, when you give that hug to somebody, when you encourage them, when you buy them a lunch, when you just do something, buy them a Coke, just it's the old saying, go, give them a Coke and a smile. It's just whatever you can do. When you do it, do you understand that becomes enormous in the hands of God? So when I'm preparing for battle, I realize there is a plot. Now that can depress me, but God along the way will always send people to encourage me. He will always send people along in my battle if I'll look closely and not deny it, because some of us now, if I'm fixing to go through a battle, I feel like, oh man, things just tough. And Pastor Lott walks up to me and says, look, man, I believe in you. I know you got this. You're going to do this. You're going to come through this. I know, Brother Lott, whatever you say. You can shake it off and not take the compliment, or you can use it as the fuel that God sent it for. Use it for the fuel. Don't look at them and say, you're just saying that. No. The word you're looking for, and practice this with me, look at me now, thank you. That's the word you're looking for. Oh, I don't deserve. That's not the word you're looking for. Well, whatever. No. The word you're looking for, thank you. And just take it. That's what Jesus does. Jesus doesn't look at her and say, oh, you shouldn't have done that. There's poor people everywhere. They're right. You should. Jesus says, thank you. Because everything that's going on, I needed this right now. I needed my Father to touch you and tell you, hey, go do this. Because notice why he sees through it. And truly I say to you, wherever the gospel is proclaimed, the whole world, what she has done will be told in memory of her. In other parts it says, she's done this for my burial. She knows that I'm fixing to go. And she's wanting to do something that'll let me know I'm with you. And truly, I say to you, and Judas Iscariot was one of the 12, went to the chief priests in order to betray. Here we go back to the plot. He breaks off of this one moment and we get back to plot. So here's the plot. Then Judas, one of his 12, one of his most precious people, went to the chief priests in order to betray him to them. When they heard it, they were glad and promised to give him money, and he sought an opportunity to... Now this word, sought an opportunity, means that he wanted to do it, but not get caught doing it. He wanted to do it because when Satan now comes along, he's going to do it, but he doesn't want the credit for doing it. Isn't it amazing somebody can gossip on you and you turn around and say, man, why did you say? I didn't say that. I didn't say that. What? I got you on video. That's not me. Because the thing the enemy hates the worst is to have to come out and admit that's me. He hates the light. Let me help somebody here tonight who you want to change your life. You want to stop being who you are. You want to become a better person. It's real simple. It's easy. It's easy. Just confess to the Lord, Lord, I'm sorry. And then secondly, drag it all in the light. Now, confessing won't be hard, will it? Because you can bow your head, Lord, I'm sorry for what I've done. Well, now let's drag it in. No. We just won't talk about it no more. No, to kill it, you got to drag it in the light. Now, that doesn't mean write about it and put it on the front page news. It may just be one person you need to share it with, somebody you confide in, maybe a pastor, we call as a fence post, just somebody you talk to who don't talk to nobody else. I don't care who it is, but you got to get it out of your system. You got to know that from this moment on, somebody knows. And let me tell you what it is. It's liberating. Because as long as the enemy can hold you in darkness and keep that conversation, well, if they knew, they wouldn't like you. If they knew, they wouldn't love you. If they knew, well, you're going to have to put it to the test. Man, I don't know how far I'm going to get tonight, but we're going to go as far as we can. Is that okay? Okay. A lot of meat, a lot of stuff to cover, but I'm moving. I'm moving fast, right? Look at the first side and say, he's moving fast. And when they heard it, they were glad and promised to give him money, and he sought an opportunity to betray him. And on the first day of unleavened bread, when the sacrifice of the Passover lamb, His disciples said to Him, "Where will you have us go and prepare for you to eat the Passover?" So now, number one that we've understood is that there is a plot against your future. The enemy has a plot. Today, the enemy has a plot around the curve for Tim Lott to set me up, to try to... And I have to understand that, and also at the same time understand that God understands it. And God says, it's okay, Tim. It's going to be okay. So number two, then, is that knowing all of this, I still have to decide to move forward. The disciples come to Him, and Jesus is sitting there thinking, well, the last place I want to be this weekend is Jerusalem. But the one place that He's supposed to go is Jerusalem. And they say to Him, what would you want us to do? Do you want us to prepare a place? Do you want us to go find something? And He says, hold on. I've already took care of it. Now, it doesn't go into detail all of this. It doesn't say whether He's talked to somebody already or whether He's already arranged this or whatever. But whether it's spiritually or whether He's done it already privately, because you have to understand at this moment, He probably did a lot of things privately because the Pharisees were trying to find a place to catch Him and to kill Him privately. So everything He did just like going up in the Garden of Gethsemane and all of that. It was things He would do to not be in public, not be in an area. So for Him to go ahead and privately say, we're going to do Passover here, but don't tell nobody. Get it ready. And He sent two of His disciples. We know this is Peter and John. Go into the city, and a man carrying a water jar will meet you. Follow him. So He said, here's what's going to happen. You're going to walk in, and you're going to see a man. Now this is you would say, Lord, it's thousands of people there. Do you understand the one person that never carries a water jar? A man. That was never his job. It was never his job. It would have been strange. If they would have walked into the city and he'd have said, now there'll be a woman carrying a water jar, that would have looked at him like, huh? But when He said, when you walk in the city, you're going to see a man carrying a water jar, and that's going to stick out like a sore thumb. He said, when you see him, follow him. Follow him all the way back to his house. And wherever he enters, say to the master of the house, the teacher says, where is my guest room? So either God has already prepared it or Jesus has already prepared it, but however it's done, in secret, it's already been set. The guest room has already been made. In fact, it isn't just a room. He says, where I may eat the Passover with my disciples. Verse 15, and He will show you a large upper room, furnished, and there prepare for us. Now I want you to understand what takes place. Peter and John have to go into town. They follow this man. He shows them the room. They make sure unleavened bread's ready. Everything else is ready. Everything's ready. And then they go down and they go get a lamb. They have to go get a lamb, and they have to carry it to the temple and carry it to the priest. The priest has to kill the lamb, pour the blood on the brazen altar, and they take the carcass of the lamb back to the house, prepare the meat, roast it, and prepare it for the Passover meal. They didn't just show up for dinner. This was prepare it for us. Get everything ready, guys. Get everything for Passover ready for us to walk in and have. And they had to have no understanding that what they're doing is what will happen to Jesus very shortly. That He will be led into the city. He will be killed. His body will be discarded. Everything that's taking place is symbolic. And the disciples set out and went to the city and found it just as He had told them, and they prepared the Passover. And when it was evening, He came with the 12. And as they reclined at a table and eating, Jesus said, truly, I say to you, one of you will betray me. Now, Mark only covers 2 areas at the Passover supper. Remember, Mark is like a comic book version. He's covering just the big stuff. Just the big stuff. There's two things he's going to cover. He's going to first cover who's going to betray him. He's going to talk about the plot, and then he's going to talk about the plan. He's going to show you that yes, there's an enemy, but yes, there's a plan. Yes, there's an enemy, but yes, there's a plan. Yes, there's cancer, but yes, there's a plan. Yes, there's trouble, but yes, there's a plan. The two cannot go opposite of each other. And as they went to recline it, he said, truly I say to you, one of you will betray me, one who is eating with me. Now when he says this, he's not trying to figure out who it is, because during a Passover, everybody is dipping and but what he's saying is, he who dips his bread in the bowl with me, he's saying it's one of you. It's one of you. One of you is going to be the one that betrays me. Anybody ever see the Leonardo da Vinci picture, The Last Supper? This is what Leonardo da Vinci paints. This part. They began to be sorrowful and to say to him one after another. Leonardo da Vinci, when he painted The Last Supper, is painting all of them leaning into Jesus and saying, is it me? None of them knowing which one it would be. None of them knowing, because we're all at the same table. We're all eating together. We're all dipping our bread in the bowl. And he said to them, it is the one of the 12 of you who dips bread into the dish with me. All he's saying is, it's one of you. For the Son of Man goes as it is written of him, but woe to the man by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. It would be better for that man if he had never been born. And as they were eating, he took bread, and after blessing it, he broke it and gave it to them and saying, take, this is my body. So the first part is he says, listen, while we're eating tonight, understand that one of you is going to betray me. I'm not naive to this. There is a plan. There is an enemy. There is someone wanting to destroy my life. But understand that everything that's happening has not caught God off. In fact, God has planned this from the beginning. The reason we're having Passover is because I will be the Passover. When Moses led the children of Israel out, he was showing him a picture of me. Let me show you. And as they were eating bread, he took bread and blessed and broke it and gave it to them and said, this is my body. Now, the bread is unleavened. Unleavened bread means it was not yeasted. It is not swole up. It's flat. It has no yeast. They did that because they were told to eat unleavened bread to represent that when they left Egypt, they left immediately and did not have time to have the bread rise. They left in such a hurry that it was no time to have the bread fixed, to have everything done. So they had to leave. Listen to me. When Jesus moves in a person's life, it is not gradual. It is not just like, oh, it'll take 10 years. It is instantaneous. It changes like that. He said the second thing is, notice, and he took a cup, and when he had given thanks, he gave it to them and said, they all drank of it. And he said to them, this is my blood of the covenant, which I poured out for many. He said, this is the other side. Remember, there was two things. The unleavened bread represented how quickly they left Egypt, how Moses led them out quickly. The second thing was the blood that was put over the post so that the death angel could not touch them. And he said, listen, by my blood, we're fixing to have another covenant, and nothing will touch you. You're coming out quickly, and nothing's touching you. And Jesus said, as surely as Moses did it in symbol in the Old Testament, I'm fixing to do it in spiritual in the New Testament. Just as sure as the enemy has a plan, God also has a plan. And God's plan will prevail. Therefore, no matter what you're going through tonight, the enemy has a plan. But if you'll just stop just for a second and realize that in the middle of all of this, God also has a plan. God has a plan for what you're going through, what you were born into, what you faced, struggles and troubles and trials you've gone through. He had a plan for every single bit of it. And tonight you're sitting here because God still has a plan. Because if the enemy had his way, you would already be gone. You'd already be an example. You'd already be an excuse. You would already be out of the way. But God says, I'm preventing that. Because if you'll let me, my plan will be greater than his. And Jesus shows us this example of how to prepare. So I first have to realize, yes, there's a battle. Yes, there's a scheme. I realize that I must keep moving forward, even when I know that it looks like the destination and where I'm headed, by all accounts, by all visible accounts, looks like this is crazy. And then thirdly, I have to realize, what is it that God's really trying to accomplish? If I were to tell you tonight and ask you the question, what do you think God is really trying to accomplish in your life? What do you think God is really trying to accomplish? Now, I can sum it up real easy, and it's either going to make you happy or it's going to hurt your feelings. Everything is designed strictly so God would get glory. That's right. Yeah, but I know, but the reason God is so that He could get glory. And Jesus understands this and He says, listen, if you're going to go forward, you need to realize God has a purpose and God has a reason. Jesus says, I got to go through all of this because God has a purpose to get glory. And the only way I can give Him glory is to fulfill everything He has for me. In my life, every day I get up, you know how I'm going to be successful, you know how I'm going to move forward, is to have the mindset that God, today, let me give you glory. It can't be about me. It can't be about my feelings. It can't be about all. If that's the case, you're going to change like the wind. You're like a leaf in the wind, whatever blows hardest against you. But if you realize each day that your life has a purpose and a meaning, then you're not a leaf anymore, you're a tree. The Bible says you're a tree that's planted by waters. And you produce fruit even in odd seasons. And even in its own season, it gives forth what it's supposed to. This is what Jesus understood. Let me hurry. Truly, I say to you, I will not drink again of the fruit of the vine, verse 25, again until that day when I drink it new in the kingdom of God. And we've already covered that in times past, that Jesus later comes back after the resurrection, and He does. Now listen to what it says. And Jesus said to them, you will all fall away, for it is written, I will strike the shepherd, and the sheep will be scattered. But after I rise up, I will go before you to Galilee. Now, number 4. Nobody will be able to go with you. Look at that person beside you and say, nobody can go with you. See, what you want to do is, if you'll help me, I'll be a better. No. If you'll just pray for me, no. Let me give you one thing that's going to happen in your life, and this is a 100% guarantee. Everybody at some time, at some place, will scatter. God will make sure of it, so that your standing is never on anyone else or any other person. It will always be. Now, you can have this rude awakening one day, 30 years, 40 years, 50 years after marriage, and they finally die and leave you, and all of a sudden this comes to this huge shock to you. Or you can realize it right now that sooner or later, me or them, we're not going. Somebody may tell me something. If Elise comes to me tomorrow and says, Tim, I feel like God's telling me this and telling me to do this, and I look at her and I'm like, whew, I don't feel that at all. Job, who was a good man, had a great marriage. His own wife walks up to him finally when he's sore and wore out and tore up, and she says, Job, I love you. Why don't you just curse God and die? Can you imagine Job? Man, I married you, been with you, had children with you, and now I'm in this bad shape, and all you got to tell me is curse God and die? Sooner or later, your kids, your wife, your husband, they're not going to understand it. They're not going to be able to walk with it. They're not going to be able to get their mind around it. It's going to be you and God. And Jesus says, listen, I've known this from the beginning. I love you guys, and you are my best friends, but what I'm fixing to go through, you can't go through it with me. And it makes it even worse when that person looks at you and says, oh, I'll never hurt your feelings. I'm telling you, everybody else may quit you, but I'll never quit. You better shake that junk off. Go ahead and shake it off, because whoever tells you next, I love you and I'll never hurt your feelings, just look at them and say, the devil is a liar. Because whether they mean it or not, they're lying. Not intentionally. There's just places that God has made you for that someone else can't go through. There's things that I have never experienced, probably never will, because God did not build me to go through certain trials or certain situations. I'm not there to say, well, I understand what you... No, I don't. And it's not important that I don't, because they can't understand what God built me for. And each one of us has to go through that alone. And we have to lay our heads down at night by ourselves. And we have to cry it out ourselves. And no matter how much somebody says I care, I don't know why I'm stuck on this, but somebody in this room needs to get that in their spirit. This walk eventually becomes you and God. And that's a beautiful thing, because He says, listen to me, after I pass this test, I then will meet you back at God. Guess what? I'm going to be a different person. I'm going to be a better person, and I'm going to have a better testimony when I run into you next time. But you can't go where I'm going. Of all the things I deal with people from, I think of people who's had their livers transplanted and things I've had to sit through and go through and families and the hardest part is there's places I can't go. There's places I can't go with them. But God can. Peter said, even though all fall away, I will not. And Jesus said to him, truly I tell you, this very night before the rooster crows twice, you will have already denied me, Peter, 3 times. And Peter was his best friend. And he knew Peter loved him. Wasn't it Peter was a bad, it's just, Peter, you can't go where I'm going. I wish you could. Boy, believe me, I wish you could. But God chose this battle for me. And thank you for caring. And He's going to cover this. Thank you for being concerned. And thank you for hanging in there. But you can't go with me. How do you know, Brother Lott? Because listen, but He said emphatically, if I must die with you, I will not deny you. And then everybody said the same thing. Yeah, we agree with him. Whatever he said, that's us. We got you. We're in this thing with you. You're not going to be alone. Okay. And they went to a place called Gethsemane. And He said to His disciples, sit here while I... Okay. So I've brought a lot of heavy stuff. You got to know there's a battle. You got to prepare. You got to realize God's in it. He's already preparing it. He's even sending people to bless you, encourage you along the way, breaking oil over your head, giving you. You got to keep moving forward. Don't quit moving forward, even though you don't see it, you don't understand. You just get up, you move forward. Keep moving toward your destiny, realizing that eventually it will feel like you're all alone and no one understands. you'll feel that way. So what do I do, Brother Lott, when I'm feeling all of this? Jesus says, I tell you what you do. You find a place and pray. Now this is where it comes all together. And they went to a place called Gethsemane, means the place where olives are crushed. The place of pressing. Isn't it amazing? He goes to the place where all of it has to come crushing together. Where somebody stamps and mashes and squeezes all the good out of something. Where they press it and get every drop of oil from it. He says, that's where I got to go. And they went a place called Gethsemane, and he said to his disciples, sit here while I pray. Just sit here while I'm praying. And he took with him Peter, James, and John, and to be greatly distressed and troubled. Now I want you to understand this. God does not need you to be a superhero. God does not need you to be fake. God does not need you to act like you got it together. God does not need you to try to put on a front. God does not need you to Photoshop your image. What God needs is you to be honest. Honesty is what helps the breaking take place and makes it easier. Jesus, go back to verse 33. I want you to get this. And he took him, Peter, James, and John, and began to be what? Mark, even though the whole book we're talking about Superman. This is the comic book version. This is Superman. This is the man that raises dead people. This is the man that just comes on the scene. This is the man that I'm talking about just can't be. And yet at this moment, he's greatly distressed and troubled. In fact, it goes further. Listen to verse 34. And he said to them, my soul is very... Different translations will give it to you in sometimes better ways. But what he's saying is, I am overwhelmed. You ever plan to do, anybody ever ride roller coasters? You ever stand in the line and watch other people doing it and you're like, that's just, and it hits you when it's like you get in that little cube and you know you're the next two that's fixing to step into the spot. And one person's like, let's get on the front, let's get on. And you're like, no, it's good. It's good back here. Third car, that's fine. At least I'll see something happening before I get there. And when you get in, now you've been watching it, it's been no big, you know what's coming. You've been standing in line for 45 minutes, you know what's coming. And then that guy puts that thing down and he checks it and said, make sure it's locked. And you're like, what do you mean make sure it's locked? It better lock. It's supposed to lock. And then your only thought is, I don't want to do this. Why? I don't really want to do this. And you turn around to the person beside you like, I want out. Oh no, come on now, we already got this far, we're going to make it. But everything inside of you now is because for the first time, you're actually realizing this is fixing to happen. And Jesus says, listen, I've talked about it, preached about it. Prophets have talked about it, but listen, it's fixing to happen. And I am terrified. It's okay. I'm terrified. I'm overwhelmed. It's okay. Jesus has given us a picture here because he says, I understand that when you reach those points where I don't know if I can make it, that's okay. I've been there. I don't think I can take anymore. That's okay. I've been there. I can't believe God let this happen. I've been there. Jesus says, I've been right in the middle of that. And he said to them, my soul is very sorrowful, even to death. remain here and watch. He says, I know I done told you I ain't going to hang around, but would you just please, just watch with me a little while. Listen to what it says. And going a little farther, he fell on the ground and prayed that if it were possible, the hour might pass from him. He just falls. I know how, we have these pictures of Jesus standing in the Garden of Gethsemane and he's like this, and in the rock. No, I want to tell you something. He went about as far as he could go and he just falls. He just falls. The Bible says to where his sweat becomes like drops of blood, to where it's mixed together. He's so much stress on him that the blood vessels inside of his body are busting. And it's mixing with his sweat. He's under such pressure and such strain that a king is fixing to let people that have no right to hurt him. He has done no wrong, and he is fixing to let them do whatever he wants. And he's fixing to allow the Father that for all the sins of the world, he's fixing to allow the Father to pour out all his wrath on him. For everything you ever did, Jesus says, I'm fixing to take it. The Father's fixing to without measure, he's going to pour it out on me. So much so that he's going to turn his own back on me and say, I can't even look at it. And he says, Abba, Father, all things are possible for you. Remove this cup from me. That's the battle. But here's the plan. Yet not what I will, but what you will. In the middle of all my hurt, I trust your plan. In the middle of all my uncertainty, I trust your plan. See, Christianity is not about asking Jesus to save you. It's not about saying, I'm sorry. I know we make it that way, and then we wonder why all these people act just as bad as they do, or they're just as messed up, and they'll tell you they're Christians, and they're not. Because let me explain it to you really careful. There's only one thing that makes you genuinely saved. It's when you can say, not my will, it's yours. Jesus said, if you say you love me and don't obey my commandments, you're not telling the truth. If Jesus was to tell the Father, Father, I love you, but I just can't do this, he said, I wouldn't be telling the truth. He says, Father, I trust you. And he came and found them sleeping. I love this. And he came and found them sleeping. And he said to Peter, Simon. Now, he doesn't call him Peter now. He goes back to his old name. Anybody ever get so mad you call them by their whole full name? Timothy DeWitt Lott? You're like, oh, Lord, what did I do? Or what did I get blamed for? He comes back and he doesn't say like normally, now, Peter, he comes back, Simon. Simon, are you asleep? You're the one that just a few minutes ago said, I'll never leave you. You can't even stay awake. Could you not watch just 1 hour with me? You were going to last forever. You were going to make it. You were never going to leave me. And let me tell you something. It hurts when people finally, you realize, I'm alone. Watch and pray that you may not enter into temptation. The spirit indeed is willing, Peter. I know your spirit is willing. But you need to realize, every one of you in this room, that your flesh is weak. And again, he went away and prayed, saying the same words. And he again came and found them sleeping, for their eyes were very heavy. And they did not know what to answer him. It's an awkward moment when you realize it's just me. Nobody knows what to say anymore. Nobody knows what to do. Hey, do you want to go see so-and-so? No. Well, you need to. I don't know what to say to them anymore. Jesus lets us feel everything that we feel. And He handles it all in one rushing moment, one overwhelming moment. And He came a third time and said to them, are you still sleeping and taking your rest? He said, that's enough sleep. The hour has come. The Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. He said it's time for both the plans to meet. I'm prepared. I'm ready. Let's go into battle. Rise up. Let us be going. See, my betrayer is at hand. Do you know what's coming? Can you sense it yet? Is it a kid? Is it your marriage? Is it you feel it bubbling up at work? You feel the tide, or maybe like me here lately, you feel the age and you feel like, oh, seasons are changing. If I told you right now, raise your hand, tell me what it is that's rising up. Could you tell me? Could you sense it? Or does it just hit you blindside? The first step is to be prepared. For every one of you in this room, I can't save you from the attack the enemy is going to bring into your life. To try to drag you down further, to embarrass you more, to hurt you more, to take away more, to rob you more. The first thing is in prayer, you have to sense it. Through the years of raising kids, being married, and pastoring, and can't tell you how many times I could shake hands with people at the back door and already know what was going on. And I look at them and say, you doing all right? Oh, yes, Pastor, I'm doing fine. I'm like, you sure? 2 days later, get a phone. Can we talk? Yeah, we can. In fact, I think we need to. Can you sense it? Well, if you can, and you can also understand that God already knew about it. And if God already knew about it, you can press forward. And if you can press forward, then you can prepare. As you press forward, you can understand that I see clearly what's going on. And when I face it and I'm dealing with it and I can't solve it, I can pray about it. And I can pray about it until I know I'm ready to go against it. That's the strategy. Doesn't matter if it's your marriage, doesn't matter if it's building buildings. If I were to sit down with you, I'd tell you, here's your strategy. Now the question is, you just going to sit there and let him wear you out? Or are you going to stop him? You just going to let him take what he wants? Or are you going to stop him? Will you stand? Tonight in this room, you may be even past sensing what the enemy is trying. It could be a job that's just fallen apart and now I don't know what I'm going to do. It could be your health. It could be a child that's, I don't know what to do with them, Pastor. I don't know what to say to them. Could be a marriage, could be just the battle that the enemy has in your mind of worth, value. Could be a myriad of things. He's constantly coming up with the next thing. And really the question is not whether you've got to go through a battle or a fight, or that's just part of life. In fact, the Bible tells us man is born but a few days and then he gets it all good, right? No, the Bible says man is born of woman but a few days and full of trouble. Welcome to life. But the good news is that there's one on the other side who wants to take every trouble and trial, everything you're going through, and turn it into the greatest testimony of your life. Wouldn't it be cool one day to be able to tell your kids, hey, you know, me and your mom, we almost didn't make it. But when we got down to our bottom and we knew the enemy was, we turned to God. God saved our marriage. Wouldn't it be cool to be able to look at your kid one day and say, when they've kind of got it all back together and they're okay, and you're saying, boy, there's a many a times we wasn't sure. You don't know how many times we called your name out in prayer and how many times we held you up and laid our hands on your pictures. And the enemy kept telling us all the time, oh, that ain't going to change, but we wouldn't let you go. Wouldn't it be cool to sit down one day and your kids, they realize, you know what, we live a pretty blessed life. And you're able to sit down and say, can I tell you why we're blessed? Because we serve the Lord. Because God has been good to us. So you're going to get, in a few years, you're going to get to tell your testimony. You're going to get to share your story. Jesus just said, in a few days I'll be back. And I'll meet you again on the other side over by the Galilee, but don't worry, my testimony is going to be a lot different then. For some of you in this room, you've got to decide. Are you going to accept what the enemy says is life? Or are you going to accept the life God says I've given you? If you're in this room tonight, can't nobody walk with you. Can't nobody go with you. You have to face it and come out on your own. It's got to be your relationship with Him. If you say, Pastor, tonight, that's me. That's me. I need a Savior. I need a champion. I need one who has a plan for my life because my plans just don't work. If that's you in this room tonight, then I want you to do something just incredibly bold. Just incredibly bold. Just slap the devil slap in the face. Just tell him I'm dragging it into the light. I'm declaring I need Him. I don't need you anymore. I need Him. I want you just to step out from where you are. I want you to come to an altar. I want you just to raise your hand. You ain't got to say nothing spectacular. You ain't got to say nothing if you don't want to. Just declare it. Say, I'm declaring by coming down, by my raising my hands, that I'm declaring that I am choosing His plan over every other plan. I'm choosing to follow Him over all the things I see, over all the other opportunities. I'm choosing Him because I believe years from now, the story that He will give me through Him will be so much better than the story I would try to create on my own. If that's you in this room tonight, are you prepared? There's a 100% chance there's a battle coming. The enemy is planning to hurt you. But there's a 100% chance that God has a plan to bring you not only out, but to make you victorious. If you're in this room tonight and you say, that's me, this is your moment.